Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about a Guelph Police Service press release from July 13th, 2021. Recently this was picked up on Twitter. Lots of people had comments about this, and so some people tagged me in it, so that's one reason to talk about it. Another is that this provides a good sort of example of how information changes from the initial investigation to what the public tends to see. Lots of people had opinions on this. There were also some people saying, sort of trying to use this as a bit of a hobby horse for gun control pushes, and we'll talk about why. So let's have a look at the press release here. So firearms, ammunition seized from West End home. 5 firearms and hundreds of rounds of ammunition were seized from a West End home Monday night after a male called police and said he'd armed himself against possible intruders. Just before 11 p.m., a male called police from a residence in the area of, and they give a cross street, to report armed suspects trying to get into his home. The male told a dispatcher he was holding a semi-automatic firearm to defend himself. Guelph Police Service officers arrived and determined there were no other people on scene. Officers made contact with the male, who agreed to come outside with his hands empty. Investigation revealed a loaded .22 caliber machine gun under a bathroom sink, as well as 4 other firearms and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, which were safely stored elsewhere in the home. The male was found to have a valid firearms license. A 33-year-old Guelph male was transported to Guelph General Hospital for an assessment. The investigation is ongoing. All right, so there were several things here that people picked up on. One of them is the discussion of hundreds of rounds of ammunition. But the other one, and this one sort of caught a lot of people's attention, is the discussion of investigation revealed a loaded .22 caliber machine gun. Lots of people said, oh my God, what the heck? And they said, okay, this guy's got a firearms license, but why has he got a machine gun? And so there was some commentary on whether this guy might be grandfathered or what's going on. But I'm a defense lawyer, so there's some things here that sort of jump out at me as inconsistencies, and I like to pick at these inconsistencies when I see them. I'm not, of course, the only person or even the first person to spot these, but let's have a look at what's going on. So the male told a dispatcher he was holding a semi-automatic firearm to defend himself. And we see that they seized 5 firearms and that the loaded .22 caliber machine gun was found under a bathroom sink, as well as 4 other firearms. So all of the guns seized are accounted for in that account. And the only one that's sort of loaded and put in a place that was sort of ready for somebody who's defending himself is this one that's described as a machine gun. But the male tells the dispatcher he's holding a semi-automatic firearm. How do we reconcile this apparent inconsistency? As a starting point, I tend to think that this guy probably knows what his own gun is. It's his gun. He tells the dispatcher it's a semi-automatic, so it's probably a semi-automatic. But I can only say probably here, because maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he's owned this for years and has just never really thought about it and has never actually sort of tried flicking the fun switch and doesn't realize that it's actually a full auto. Or maybe this guy's lying to the dispatcher. That's also a possibility. He knows he's got a full auto in his hands, but he doesn't really want to tell the cops that. Also a possibility. So lots of news organizations picked up this story, and everyone that I could find either ran this verbatim or nearly verbatim, where they didn't change anything, but maybe they put a little bit of lead in or lead out or something like that. But otherwise it's exactly the same. So I did a thing that none of the news organizations did, which is I did a journalism, at least a little bit. It wasn't much. I phoned the media guys and I just said, hey, I got some questions here. This isn't making all that much sense to me. Can you explain what's going on? And they had no problem with that. So I found out what actually is happening here. This .22 caliber machine gun in the original report is described as being a .22 caliber semi-automatic firearm, which resembles an MP40 machine gun, as they describe it in the news report. Now, of course, MP40 is a submachine gun, but that's a quibble here. The main thing is that he notes it's a semi-automatic firearm which resembles a fully automatic firearm. Well, now I know exactly what this is. This is a GSG MP40 clone in .22 caliber. It's a semi-automatic firearm. It is non-restricted. You can buy one of these if you've got a firearms license, at lots of gun stores. And you can just walk in, show them your firearms license, and walk out with one. They're a fairly common sort of bog standard semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle, and nothing to be particularly concerned about. So lots of people were out there saying, oh, there's these gun owners running around, with fully auto firearms. And there are some. I mean, there are people who are grandfathered, but this guy being 33 probably isn't one of them. And I say probably, I think it's definitely. But anyway, regardless, that's not what's going on. What happened is, in the game of telephone, from the guy who originally wrote the report to the media guy, some wires got crossed. Maybe the story was getting juiced up, or maybe they just got some confusion going on. I can't really necessarily fault the Guelph Police Service media guy for that, because he probably isn't a gun expert and he's reading this in a hurry and so forth. And ultimately, he's not the guy whose job it is necessarily to be accurate. I mean, he should be, but the news organizations that picked up this story really ought to have spotted this inconsistency and said, hey, maybe we will try this journalism thing and investigate and see if we can resolve this. Because plenty of places ran this with a headline of machine gun. And if your headline turns out to be incorrect, that's a bit of an issue to me. It doesn't look like there's been any criminal charges here. It looks like it's some other kind of investigation. I don't have all the details here, so I'm not sure what's going on. And so I can't comment on the appropriateness of this. I just don't know. I mean, maybe this is a situation where this guy legitimately needed his firearm for self-defense, or maybe this is a situation where the guy's having a psychotic break, or something else entirely. I don't know. I'm glad to see that the police didn't, put out his name here, because I don't think that would be a good thing. And I have rumors as to who this guy might be in terms of name. I'm not repeating it here either. So that's one thing. The second thing, of course, is that, and they do this all the time, hundreds of rounds of ammunition. I hate this because they always present this as though this is something that is notable. It's like saying that they found hundreds of grams of bread in somebody's house, because this is what hundreds of rounds of 22 caliber ammunition looks like. Oh, holding it up the wrong way here. This is a box of 22 caliber ammunition, and it contains 525 rounds. Real super common that people buy these. This cost me just a little bit over $20. So when they say hundreds of rounds of ammunition and there's a 22 in the house, you're probably talking about $20 worth of ammunition. You might spend more on a pizza. This is not shocking or... So I really wish when they talked about hundreds of rounds of ammunition that they actually provided some context so that the public who may not know firearms can actually realize that this is not a big deal. This is not a story. This is not interesting. This is just, how you buy them. I think you'd actually have a hard time buying 22 ammunition. I mean, I know it's available in smaller boxes, but most people don't buy anything smaller than this sort of thing for 22 ammunition. It just makes sense. Anyway, that's kind of, I guess, breaking this down a little bit. But you see what sort of typically happens. The officer here was actually quite careful. They investigated what the firearm was. They properly described it, at least close enough in the report. And somewhere along the lines that got changed up to something that is, of course, a little juicier. I've noted before that I have run cases that have made the news. And in some of these circumstances, when they made the news, I didn't realize I was reading about my own case until I actually recognized the name of the accused in it and went, wait a minute. Because the stories that we see in the news and that tend to make us angry are often not what actually happened and not what's really going on. And it's not because of necessarily malice. It's just because of ordinary errors and laziness that allows this sort of thing to creep in. And sometimes, of course, it's because media organizations they make money, just as I do, on advertising. And so you want your stories to be interesting. But when you're relying on stories of things that actually happened in the world, sometimes the world is boring. Sometimes the world is uninteresting. So that poses a bit of a challenge for people. I'm lucky enough to be able to pick and choose interesting stories and maybe try to make them interesting just through how I present the content. I don't know if I succeed at that, but I try. But if you're a local news organization, you kind of get what you get. So that always poses a bit of a tension and a bit of a challenge. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this has been useful. Please like this video. Please share it with your friends. Please subscribe to see more content. I've got some more stuff coming that takes a fair bit of editing, which is still a skill I am rough at. So trying to learn to do that a little bit better so that I can present to you more content that involves sort of hands-on discussion. But thank you once again. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters. There's a link in the description below. I'm also going to link the news release, and want to thank at the $50 level, Jonathan Wheeler, Jason Elliott, Canada's National Farms Association, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, Ivo Nedev, the CCFR, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Matt Ward, Mark Whittington, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich. Thank you once again to all the people in the $10 crawl who will be immediately following. And thank you as well to all of my other Patreon supporters. Till next time, I hope I've armed you with knowledge.